Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the HCM Quarterly meeting. This is our quarterly update meeting with the share team and central payroll to provide you all of the latest and greatest information as we're moving forward. As I had stated earlier, this is Claudette Romero's first time hosting this presentation. She has recently been promoted to the payroll supervisor position and will be your host for this meeting. We will allow you to use the Q&A to ask any questions as we present and try to answer them as efficiently as possible. But there should be some time at the end of the meeting for any additional questions that we weren't able to respond to. So with that, let's go ahead and turn it over to the share team. Next slide.
Good morning, everyone. Alok here with the share team. Thank you guys so much for being here so early on a Monday morning, and congratulations, Claudette. Very awesome. So I'm here to discuss queries in HCM, and I'd like to start with just kind of a base overview on the different types of queries. So what are they, the information they provide, and when notification or modifications to them can be made. So on the screen here, you'll see two different columns, the two different types of queries in HCM. The first on the left side column is primarily used by oversight agencies. I won't name all oversight agencies, but for example, they are used by central payroll, state personnel, or if it's benefits, HCA. In most cases, running these oversight queries will be for a very specific, very defined purpose. On the right-hand column, we have global queries. Global queries are meant for all agencies. They are general use queries. And the results they provide will be more granular. Again, they are general use by all agencies. You can always tell what kind of query you are looking at based on how it starts. So for an oversight agency, an oversight query will always start with an H. Here you can see we have HRH for HR queries and HRP for payroll. General queries will always start with NMS. So NMS underscore HR, again, is a global general use HR query. And NMS underscore PY is going to be a global general use payroll query. Lastly, when it comes to modifying queries, we often get requests to add or delete fields in queries. When it comes to an oversight query, those that begin with the letter H, we will not modify those queries. Any request to update that query must come from the proper channel in the proper oversight agency. For a global query, the ones that start with NMS underscore, any query modifications will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Now, many times we may not modify a query and instead provide you with the name of one that is already existing. Claudette, go ahead and click forward. We have created a tool to help you in looking up these global queries. It is the query catalog. So you can find it. The query catalog is the place for the most commonly used and most useful queries. To find it, you run the query NMS underscore query underscore catalog. So it's literally that name. A couple of caveats to this. We add information to this catalog as time permits, so it is a work in progress and it will have new queries added to it regularly. It will describe the purpose, whether there are prompts, and whether it should be scheduled. Please remember, if a query says it should be scheduled, that is because it is pulling a large amount of data or data from a large amount of sources. Those queries that state that they should be scheduled should not be run on demand. Whenever you run this query, you'll also see a space for additional notes and details. Now, as I stated, the query catalog is continuously evolving. So if you currently are running a query regularly and you find it very useful, please submit a help desk ticket and we will add it as we have time. Lastly, I do want to go over searching for queries if you don't find the query that you need in the query catalog. There are a couple different ways to search for queries. Claudette, go ahead and move forward one more slide. And the first thing we're going to talk about here is using the wildcard. So the wildcard is the percent symbol. The wildcard symbol will automatically pick up anything before or after your search phrase or keyword. So for example, if I didn't know specifically what query I am looking for, but I know it deals with job data, I could type in percent job percent, and it would automatically find any query with that word in it. This can be used in both the query name or query description fields. The final way to search, go ahead and click forward one more time, Claudette, is through the advanced search page. Here you can type in factors you know, and you can use different modifiers. So it can begin with, end with, contains. Those are kind of the different modifiers. You can put in more than one criteria to search against as well. So for example, in this screenshot, we are searching by both query name, which will begin with NMS, and in the description, we are looking for the word job. And it just needs to be in anywhere in the description. The modifier we used was the contains modifier. And that is everything that I've got for queries today. Please feel free to add anything in the chat and if you have any questions. And with that, I'll bring up Mikkel McKinley.
Actually, it's me. Hi, Audrey.
I'm sorry, Audrey.
No problem. All right, I'll be quick though, so we can get to Mikkel. All right, I want to cover email addresses first. This was a request from our admin team. We have a lot of bad email addresses in the system, and so we really do need your help on maintaining those for employees. So an employee can have two email addresses on their personal data page, the contact information tab. They can have a home email address and a business email address. The home email address can be any email address, any domain. It could be Google, it could be, Gmail, it could be Apple or iCloud. It could be Hotmail or Yahoo, or some people still have AOL. Could be any of those. Business email, however, should be set up with a state of New Mexico valid domain. And the reason why that's important is because it ties into granting security access. An employee has to have a valid state of New Mexico domain in order to have share security. So examples of that would be like the nm.gov, nmcourts.gov, da.nm.gov, etc. There are quite a few of them. They even include like the UNM and I believe like Albuquerque Public Schools, because we have employees all over with different email domains. If for some reason you have a domain that needs to be added, you would need to submit a help desk ticket to have that added as a valid domain. If you do set up an employee with a business email address that is a non-valid domain, then it will delay them in getting their share login and security set up. Next slide, please. All right, a little overview on the FY27 benefits. So number one, the open enrollment period closed on Friday. So no more elections from employees. The EasyGov has been working on entering in all of the elections that people made. As soon as they are done with that entry, then we will officially close out the open enrollment in the system. Number two, we do get quite a few questions on SEPA and whether someone qualifies for SEPA based on the hourly rate that the employee is at. And we get a lot of questions about this employee is getting promoted, but they have this SEPA coverage code in the eligibility field 1. we do not determine SEPA coverage based on an employee's hourly rate of pay. We don't determine SEPA coverage at all. SEPA coverage is determined based on tax data that has been filed with TRD and or through the application with HCA. So if there are questions about an employee's SEPA coverage and whether they actually qualify, then those questions need to go to the healthcare authority. We will not make any changes to SEPA coverage for an employee, so please don't ask us to make those changes. And then finally, just a reminder, because we still continue to get quite a lot of questions on this, we had to insert a 7/1/26 job data row to change employee SEPA status as of 7/1. That means there's a future dated row out there for quite a few employees, I think about 5,000. So for those employees, if you do have something that needs to be entered now with a current effective date, please submit a help desk ticket to us. We will assist you with that just to make sure that it gets entered correctly, because if you try and go and do it on your own, you also may not make the changes necessary on the future dated row, which means that we could have an out of sync issue, and that could cause problems with employee pay or other things. So please do reach out to us if you need assistance with that. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and that's it. I will give you to Mikhail now.
Good morning, everyone. All right, my turn. All right, so our team's been working on the FY27 1% increases, and we're going to plan to run that increase on the 9th or 10th of July. We're still trying to nail down a specific date. But I do have a few reminders. I'll just make sure everything goes smoothly and all employees receive the increase. So the first reminder is, until we've added that increase row, please do not add any effective dated rows that are after July 4th. So July 5th and on. You can, of course, enter a July 4th row, and the process will go in and add a sequence 1 on top of that. Please nothing after July 4th. And the next one is for expected end dates. So if you have an employee who's eligible for the increase and they have an expected end date on job data that is before July 4th, they will not get that increase by our process. It'll skip those employees. So the deadline to update those expected end dates is July 3rd. And we have this query that's in gold, this NMS HR job end date, that you can run to identify employees that need to be updated. On that query, you'll just enter July 4th on the prompt, and then it'll list all employees who have an end date before that, if any. And lastly, EDAs. So EDAs need to be dated between July 1st, 2025 and July 3rd, 2026. So anytime within that time frame. And the deadline to enter EDAs into Share is July 3rd. And we again have this query in gold that'll help you identify employees that still need an EDA. So I know there are a lot of dates that are being thrown at you on the screen, so I'm going to pause to see if there are any questions, which I don't think so. Okay. But yeah, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll either type in the chat or respond if we're still presenting. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, I think there's something coming in. Okay. So that July 4th row will pick up most employees for the 1% increase. But for your employees that are still on probation, we will have a biweekly process that'll run the first day of the pay period. And it'll run for employees that are at the courts, DAs, classified executive employees, and employees at the public defenders. So this is for employees on their probation, and it'll take effect the first full pay period after they complete probation. So for to take today as an example, so let's say an employee comes off of probation today, May 18th. The effective date for the 1% increase will be May 23rd. And there is a little bit different logic for the EDAs. So for employees that are on probation, the EDAs need to be dated between June 1st, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. So slightly different time frame. And we do get quite a few questions on this. So just please try to keep that in the back of your mind. We have a different time frame for those probationary employees. And the action and reason we're going to be using for all employees, not just the probationary, you'll see is the pay change as the action and the FY27 legislative increase for the reason. All right. Any questions, comments, anything that needs to be clarified? Okay, well, if you do, you can pop them in the chat and we'll answer them if they come in. And I will turn it over to Jim. Thanks, everyone.
And good morning. I'm going to go over a couple things with longevity. First, talk about what's going to happen at the end of the current fiscal year, and then talk about some changes going into fiscal year 27. So we've been working on a process for fiscal year 26. You know, from where we started last July to where we are now, first of all, the per pay period amounts have changed partway through. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do a reconciliation for employees and make adjustments. So the first thing you're going to see is on the last payment in June, which is for the pay period ending June 19th, the pay date of June 26th, there's going to be probably an amount that will be slightly different from what employees have been getting. And that's to true up the amounts so that we are getting them to the total amount for the fiscal year. For example, if they're supposed to get $700, we want to make sure that the fiscal year total equals exactly 700. And the second thing that will happen in that last pay period is we're going to have to do a small adjustment loaded through the pay sheet upload process. And that's because of the issue of task profile distribution, where you have more than one where you have more than one distribution line. You can imagine that the math just doesn't math when it comes to distribution percentages taking these amounts. So we're going to have to make an adjustment and process it through the push-up table directly into the pay line. And that adjustment should be a small adjustment, anywhere from a penny to 10 cents. And that's just to true up the payment, again, to make it equal. For example, if their bonus is 700. So that's what's happening in June, the end of June, for fiscal year 26. For fiscal year 27, you can go to the next slide, please. So for fiscal year 27, the amounts are going to change because this year in fiscal year 27, the per pay period amounts are starting at the correct amount, whereas, like I said earlier, a few minutes ago, where we started in 2026, the amounts were slightly different. So now the amounts listed below per pay period are going to be the new amounts, again, because of distribution issues where someone's pay is split by a percentage. The amount might not be exactly 26.93. It might be 26.91 or 92. And again, in the FY27, we'll have to true it up at the end of the year to account for that. So we've also given you a little flow chart here to show you how you can figure out if someone is eligible or not. It's pretty straightforward and simple. Is the employee a classified governor's exempt or state police SAL admin plan? If yes, then on July 1st of 2026, will they be temporary or salaried? If they're temp or salaried, then they are not eligible for the longevity bonus. And then the final thing is on June 30th of 2027, so end of fiscal 27, will the employee have 5 or more years of continuous state service in any branch. And this is a slight change from 2026. And if yes, then they're eligible for the FY27 pay. So that's FY26 and 27 longevity. If you have any questions, feel free. If not,
there is a question, Jim.
okay.
So they're asking, will DFA be sharing the longevity payment adjustment info with the agency budget departments? And I don't really think this would be necessary because the budgets were built around the full amount. So
Correct.
any adjustments that are made should not be impacting budget, correct, Jim?
That is correct. We're not going to pay someone, for example, $2,000 if the amount eligible was $1,500. We're going to make sure that the annual amount is exactly what it should be.
And then I have a question just for general knowledge. So when we're saying we're going to be truing up from 1 to 10 cents, that could be either positive or negative, correct?
Correct. That's a good question. Yes. And yes, that is true.
Thank you.
We are just for informational purposes, we are trying to create a rounding rule in time and labor that would prevent these rounding issues from happening going forward. But that's a work in progress, and we don't know that that will be in time, or that we will be able to truly accomplish that. So we're hoping that we can do that, and we will be able to put it in so that we don't have these issues in FY27. But as of right now, we do not have that in place. And then I also wanted to just comment, going back to what I was saying before with the future dated 7-1 row. We did have a question from Blinky. For an employee who separated before 7-1, do we still have to submit a ticket to enter the separation on their job data? And my answer is no, you do not need a ticket on that. If they are truly terminating, you can delete that 7-1 row so that you can enter in the termination. But please be sure that it is a termination and not a transfer, because we do still get quite a few tickets to change someone from it was miscommunicated, they should have been a transfer, and it was put in a termination, or vice versa. So please do ensure that it is truly a termination. And I think that that is all that we have. So any questions on any of that?
I don't see any. Please stick around, someone, in the event that someone has a question as we move forward. But thank you for all of that great information. So moving on to Central Payroll Bureau. So we have some updates for you, some end of year information that we're going to go over, and just some new rules that are going to be coming into play. So go ahead, Claudette. So the end of the fiscal year, pay period ending July 4th, is the split year payroll. And the system will automatically split those payrolls. So there's no reason for agencies to go in and accrue in FY26 for the pay period ending July 4th. The system will automatically do that. Additionally, any additional pays or longevity payments that need to be posted in the fiscal year will post on the date that the input falls on. So if you put it on June 30th, it will default into FY26. If it is entered on July 1st, it should default into FY27. So if you have additional pays, I know some agencies do have authority for additional longevity pays that they want paid in FY26. Please make sure that those are input before a June 30th date if you want it in July 26, or after a 7-1 date if you want it in fiscal year 27. If you do need to submit an additional pay request and you need to ensure that it falls in FY26, Please note that on your request in FSS so that the payroll admins, when they input that information, know that it needs to be input on a specific date in order to ensure that it falls within a specific fiscal year. Next slide, please. Also, at the crossover of the fiscal years, we do have to do combo code and task profile updates. The share team is very effective in making sure that as many of those get updated through processes as we can, so that the agencies don't have to do so many of them manually. The automated combo code update process will be run on May 31st, 2026. And what this process does is it looks at all of the active task profile IDs and updates them if they meet the criteria. And if the task profile contains the combo code and the bud ref for FY26, it will automatically update it to the FY27 codes, which are I-27 and class K0000. If the task profile ID contains a combo code with a budget reference 926 and J, it will also update those for the FY27 information. The automated process does not update task profile IDs if it does not contain either of those budget reference or combo codes listed above. And if you have any of task profile IDs that are not updated, you will be responsible for manually updating them. And this is very, very important, because when we get to our payroll journals, if the task profile has not been updated, it will only post that information as long as FY26 is open, and it will post it in the incorrect year. So when it posts, it's going to post it with the FY26 bud ref and class into FY27, which is going to create a journal entry that you will then have to manually adjust. So please make sure that we are as proactive as we can be in getting these task profile and combo codes updated for the appropriate bud ref and class for FY27 before July 1st. There is a query that you can run in HCM that's shown there in white, which identifies all of the task profile IDs, both active and inactive for your agency. So if you have an inactive profile and you know that you're going to be using it in FY27, you need to go ahead and make sure that it has been updated. Additionally, there is the second query there will help you to identify combo codes that are assigned to the department budget tables for each fiscal year in. So not only do the combo codes need to be identified, but the budget tables need to be updated as well. So while the share team will handle most of this for you automatically, the agencies are responsible to make sure that these have been updated by 7/1, or they will have to address them in their budget journals and potentially cause a lot of delays in posting payroll to your financials. So keep this in mind. We will be sending out our yearly memo with the full instructions on how to make sure that this is addressed this week. So expect that to be coming out soon. Next slide, please. With the crossover of the fiscal year, we are also going to find that there are going to be 3 plan years open for adjustment for insurance corrections. So usually we have to deal with this at the end of the calendar year, where we have 2 plan years open. The calendar year that just ended and the current calendar year, because we are crossing over into a fiscal year for insurance. That means we are going to actually have 3 plan years that are going to be open for corrections. So if the correction is for contributions that need to be collected for plan year 25, meaning anytime that we did not collect insurance coverages and we need to collect those contributions from January to December of 2025, those contributions, those insurance corrections requests need to be post-tax. So any FY or calendar year 25 insurance collections are going to be post-tax. For plan year 26, which covers January through June of 2026, any contributions that are addressed through payroll that need to be added for this plan year, for the FY26 plan year, are allowed to be pre-tax until December 31st, 2026. After December 31st, 2026, they will be post-tax. They can only be pre-tax in the calendar year for which those contributions apply. So as long as we are in calendar year 26, all 26 contributions can be pre-tax. And it's not until we move into January of 27, then the plan year 26 would become post-tax. For plan year 27, which covers the new plan year that's going to be opening July 1st and running through June 30th of 2027, any of those contributions will be pre-tax until December 31st of 2027. And I know this can be very confusing. So if you need assistance or you need some additional help, please reach out to your payroll administrators, reach out to Claudette and the training team, and they can assist you in determining whether your request for insurance corrections should be pre-tax or post-tax. It will get simpler next year. It's just because we're going through this transitionary period with the short year that makes it a little more difficult. Next slide, please. And because of this transitionary period, these are the rules that HCA is establishing for setting up insurance benefits for people that are hired between May 16th and June 30th of 2026. These new hires are entitled to benefits from their date of hire through the end of June for the current plan year, and will need to be offered benefits for the new plan year, which begins July 1st. I'm not going to read all of these to you because I know you can read. And these may be changing. This is actually information that HCA is going to be sending out. So I just kind of stole their information to make sure that I presented it to everybody so that they are aware of it. That it is very, very important that we offer the new hires both their initial coverage and their coverage for next fiscal year. Additionally, anytime somebody signs up for benefits, they need to provide a copy of those benefits that they signed up for to HR for verification purposes. So please note this slide. Please go back and review this slide so that you're familiar with all of the rules that are going to be in play for the new hires starting Saturday. Anybody that was hired as of Saturday and moving forward through the end of the fiscal year. And next slide, please. Sick leave buyback. Every year we do sick leave buyback twice a year. So January is the first full pay period in January and the first full pay period in July. And this is in accordance with subsection 1.7.7.10 of NMAC rules. any employee that has an excess of 600 hours of unused sick leave is entitled to sell back those additional hours up to 120 hours at 50% of their hourly rate of pay. Employees are only allowed to do this one time per year. So since July is the beginning of the fiscal year, you do not need to be concerned with whether they sold time back in January or not. It goes by fiscal year. So July is the first opportunity for this fiscal year for employees to sell back their time. The sick leave buyback will be in pay period 7/18/2026. And Central Payroll asks that agencies input the sick leave buyback on timesheets and provide Central Payroll an Excel spreadsheet of the employees who are buying back time. You do not need to submit each individual employee in FSS. You can submit a Excel spreadsheet if you have multiple employees that are buying back time in order for DFA to do the second approver. I know with the rollout of the FSS system, it got a little confusing in January as to how those were supposed to be submitted. And some agencies were submitting the spreadsheet, and some agencies were going through the work of submitting each individual employee in FSS. Because we are aware of the fact that there are multiple employees that are doing this, we do accept an Excel spreadsheet with the name of the employee ID number, how much they're selling back, and DFA will second approve any of those inputs once we get that Excel spreadsheet. So make it easy on yourself, make it easy on us. Do the spreadsheet as opposed to submitting individually each employee that is selling back time. It just isn't very efficient for us to ask you to input 20 or 30 FSS submissions in order for us to second level approve the sick leave buyback. Additionally, there is a query that can be run that will tell you who has sick leave over 600 hours. Please do not run this query until after pay period ending 7/4 is completed. You do need to account for any adjustments that would occur between now and then. And so while we like to be proactive, it's better if we wait until all of the information is actually in the system and we're pulling the data directly from the system. So please run this query after 7/4. And when you're inputting it on the pay line, it should be time reporting code SCKBBB. We will also send out the memo on the sick leave buyback once it gets closer to the time, just to remind you. But since we won't have another quarterly meeting, I wanted to make you aware of these deadlines that are coming up. So Greg is asking, does this also apply to existing employees who have a qualifying event in this period? Any qualifying event for insurance coverage, Greg, has its own rules and regulations that it fall under. So I'm not real familiar with what all of those rules are, but if you reach out to HCA for qualifying events and the time lapse that, or the time period that it needs to apply, they can assist you with that. I just don't want to answer for HCA since that is not my area of authority. And is there a deadline to have the sick leave buyback Excel report submitted to DFA? There will be a deadline, and it will be the same deadline as all of our other deadlines for submissions in FSS. As I said, as we get closer to the time period where the sick leave buyback will actually occur, we will send out the information with those deadlines in them. So we're a little far in advance right now for me to determine exactly what that deadline is going to be. But do keep in mind that that is also a holiday pay period. And as you receive notification today, Central Payroll, or this week, I'm sorry, last week, Central Payroll does move up deadlines when there is a holiday that falls within the pay period that will be impacting payroll processing. And I'm pretty sure the 4th of July is going to be one of those deadlines. So those deadlines will be moved up, but you will get notification of them. Yes, I do understand that the pay period ending listed for July are off by a day. No, I don't think so. Maybe. I would have to look and verify that. On my presentation, I will say that is entirely possible. Unfortunately, I have a lot of calendars and a short period of time. So if they're off by a day,
Audrey, I'll just chime in, right? Yeah, the pay period ends 7/3, and then the following one is 7/17.
okay, so
it
she is
one day.
correct, and we will get those corrected when we send out the slides for the final. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I will admit I'm not perfect, and when I'm looking at payroll calendars, I unfortunately sometimes look at the wrong ones. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We will get that fixed. All right. Any other questions that need to be addressed? Okay. Next slide, please. The next thing I want to cover is the legislative House bills. We've had several agencies that have reached out to us for clarification and assistance with line of duty injuries. So as you may be aware, there are a couple of House bills that address line of duty injuries and people that go out on workers' comp. So there's Legislative House Bill 47 and House Bill 43. And both of these House bills have clauses for agencies to cover the cost of benefits if an employee is out on workers' comp. It had to have been a line of duty injury, and they have to be out 100%. And there is absolutely no difference between House Bill 47 and House Bill 43 as it pertains to insurance. So in both House bills, it reads that an employer shall pay 100% of the employee group insurance contributions due and payable for an employee who is injured while performing a public safety function or duty, and as a result of the injury is placed on approved workers' compensation. And the cost of the insurance means the premium required to provide coverage. So if an employee goes out on workers' comp due to a line of duty injury that is covered under House Bill 47 and House Bill 43, they are not required to take leave time in order to cover their insurance benefits. If they are out 100% on workers' comp, then the agency is required to cover the employee portion of their insurance benefits. The system is set up where there is a code that we can use, which will mean the system will automatically charge 100% of that coverage to the employer through payroll. It would require a pay sheet to be generated each pay period in order for that to occur. So we would need to acknowledge that they're on workers' comp in order for that to occur, but the system can handle it and will do it automatically. I would definitely reach out to the share team for assistance with what that code is and how to get those people set up. Next slide, please. Now, House Bill 43 also has in it an impact on para. And House Bill 43 indicates that the agencies are responsible for 100% of the para contributions that the employee would have contributed had they continued to be paid through the state. So this again is a very specific set of employees and a very specific reason for the absence. And it must be 100% approved workers' comp. Again, the employees are not required to take leave in order to make these para coverages. The agency, as it states in the bill, is responsible for paying and remitting to the association. Contribution amounts should be calculated based upon a salary equal to the member's salary at the time of the injury. Next slide, please. So I want to go over this a little bit more because we also have in play in relation to this the NMAC rule, which is 10.4.7.13. And the NMAC rule states that while an employee is on workers' comp, in no case shall the employee's salary exceed the amount of the employee's regular salary payments. So the purpose of these House bills are to ensure that employees who are injured in the line of duty are made whole. And if an employee chooses to use leave while on workers' comp, that is considered made whole. And I'm going to go over the example we have over here in a minute to help explain that. So because NMAC specifically states an employee cannot exceed his regular salary payments while on workers' compensation, if an employee is made whole, meaning they are earning 100% of their regular salary, then the agency does not pay the employee benefits. So if we look at the chart on the right, you will see that I just picked a random number, a random rate, hourly rate of pay, for example. So most of our line of duty injuries for employees fall within this hourly rate of pay. So in the first column, we see an employee works 80 hours. His regular salary at $25 an hour would work out to be $2,000 pay period. And once we deduct his insurance and his para and his RHC, his net earnings are $1,665.41, meaning he takes home $1,665.41. Overtime does not come into play. Shift diffs, none of those additional benefits or payments come into play here. We're strictly talking about his regular rate of pay. So if an employee, the second column, chooses to take leave for the additional time that workers' comp doesn't cover, he would earn on workers' comp $1,333.40. And he would take leave for the additional $666.60 to bring his total biweekly pay to $2,000. At that point, he is whole, okay? So he's already received the benefit from the state, meaning he's using his leave time accrued to be made whole. So in this circumstance, he is not on 100% workers' comp, and he would still be responsible for his benefits. And so as expected, when you deduct his benefits, his net earnings, his net take home would stay at the 1665.41. Here is where it gets interesting. So in the third column, he goes out on workers' comp, and workers' comp only pays for 53.336 hours. That's the rate of workers' comp. It pays for, I believe, 66.6% of your wages, which means his workers' comp hourly pay would be $1,333.40. That would be what he takes home. So in order to make him whole, the state will pick up 100% of his cost for his insurance, his para, and his RHC, which is a total of $334.59, bringing his earnings, his take home, to the $1,667.99, which is in line with what his normal earnings would be. If the employee goes out on workers' comp and takes his leave, he's taking his $2,000, so he's whole at that point, and then the state picks up his benefits. He is now earning $2,334 per pay period, which means that we are now in violation of the NMAC rule, because it says in no case shall the employee's salary exceed the amount of the employee's regular salary payments. So it's very, very important that we distinguish which bucket these people are falling into. If they are using leave, they are not 100% on workers' comp. And therefore, House Bill 43 and 47 does not apply. If they are only getting workers' comp, House Bill 43 and 47 does apply, and the agency is responsible for those payments. Any questions? Okay. I anticipated questions, so I guess we will move forward. The next one is also a hot topic, and I don't know how many agencies this has applied to currently, but I anticipate it applying to several more in the future. Discharged employees in the state of New Mexico, there is a New Mexico statute, it's statute 50.4.4, that requires when you involuntarily terminate an employee must be paid all of his final wages within 5 days of that discharge. Final wages has been determined to include annual leave payouts. So the rule also states that an employee who is involuntarily terminated may demand their final pay, meaning you should be placing that check in their hands by the close of business day that demand was made. If an agency is discharging an employee, they should be reaching out to payroll immediately. A discharged employee making a final demand of payment, we will not be able to satisfy those requirements unless we have been given prior notice. So as soon as an agency learns that they are going to involuntarily terminate an employee, they should be reaching out to Central Payroll to make arrangements to get that check issued. We do have a process in place where at any point in time, we can make a 5 demand payout. The FSS system allows us to input that information into FSS and request a manual warrant request indicating that it is a 5-day payout. When you put that request into the system, at that point, you do have to include the TLV information so that we can ensure that the TLV is paid out as well. We just recently saw an agency that received a notification of a potential fine of over $13,000 because they did not pay out the TLV of a involuntarily terminated employee within those 5 days. This occurred 2 years ago. So, according to the rules, they have 4 years by which that they can request that DWS fines or penalizes state agencies for not meeting that criteria. I have had multiple conversations with DWS. The state of New Mexico does not have an exception to this rule. We are required to meet the upon demand requirements or the 5-day payout requirements of statute 54-4. So if you have an employee that is being involuntarily terminated, I highly recommend that you reach out to Central Payroll as soon as you receive that information to determine whether or not we need to cut a check immediately or you need to submit the requirements for a 5-day payout. There are guidelines in MAPS PR 1.7 that address 5-day payouts, and it's becoming more common knowledge across the community. So as people are discovering this, they are going to be going to DWS for enforcement. It is calendar days. That is an excellent question, Sherry. So yes, when we say 5-day payout, it is 5 calendar days, which means that Saturday and Sunday count. Also means that holidays count. So when we say a 5-day payout, is the 5-day rule only for involuntarily terminated employees, or is this for any discharged employee? Only if they have been involuntarily terminated. So if we are choosing to dismiss them for cause, then the 5-day rule applies. If they resign, then the rule is that the wages are paid in the normal pay cycles. Do we have to calculate the additional annual leave? I'm sorry, okay. Do we have to calculate the additional annual leave and sick leave hours that would have accrued that pay period when we submitted the TLV payment for a discharged employee? Yes, you do. So part of the packet that gets submitted in FSS does account for the wages, the hourly wages that are currently being paid. So for instance, if an employee is put on administrative leave and there are 40 hours in the pay period that the administrative leave is paying for before the termination date, they would accrue leave on those 40 hours and it should be added to the TLV requested amount. That's why I'm saying reach out to your payroll administrators. They can assist you in walking through what those calculations look like, what forms you need to submit to ensure that we do a 5-day payout. Now, as most of you are aware, we cannot do manual warrants during the payroll cycle. So if payroll is running for the state we cannot stop and do a manual warrant. What payroll does is they input the information into the system and they will calculate the payroll check. And then they will take that information and they will issue a B warrant so that you are able to provide the employee with payment of those wages within the 5 days. A B warrant still takes at least 24 hours to process, because when we put it into the system, it has to run through the overnight process in order to get a check cut. So it is very, very important that if somebody says, I want that check, payroll has already been notified and is already working on it. In most cases, we cannot get you a check same day. I have never seen an instance where payroll is able to produce a same day check. We can, however, produce a second day check. So keep that in mind. Like I said, it's very important that if you are going to involuntarily terminate someone, payroll has been notified and is aware. Greg is asking, what will the department's responsibility be if a former employee comes back today and claims they are not paid in a timely manner? That is dependent upon your legal department. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about the past. It is what it is. So it depends upon whether your legal department chooses to disagree with it. What I am finding legal areas doing is using the state personnel rules, because state employees are covered by the state personnel rules and are using that as a defense. I have not heard on this last one whether or not that has been an effective defense, meaning that they have sided with us. I can tell you that for the most part, we are losing those, either because agencies are not disputing them, they're just paying them because they're not a large amount and are not disputing them, or because LRD has decided that we were not in compliance. When I spoke with DWS, this is part of their requirements as a settlement from a lawsuit that they were involved in, where one of the civil rights agencies actually sued them for not, quote unquote, following the law. And this was one of the stipulations that they agreed to in that litigation, was that they would start enforcing this particular rule across the state of New Mexico. And as part of that enforcement, as I stated, the state does not have an exception to it, so we are subject to that enforcement as well. Any other questions? No, this is not only for classified employees. This applies across the board. Classified, judicial, and legislative. I mean, for every branch of government, this applies. This is not a this is not specific to just classified employees. The rules apply to every employee employed within the state of New Mexico, whether you're employed by the state, by the county, by a private employer. These are the rules that are being enforced across the board to all employers, and it does not matter what type of employee you are and who your employer is. All of them are being held to this 5-day payout rule and the on-demand rule. So please be aware that it's not just state employees, it's not just classified employees, it is all employers, all employees. With an immediate demand for payment, if the employee is set up for direct deposit, can approval, I can't see the rest of this question. Can approval for payment be made through direct deposit? We are going to be getting to that. So I'm going to hold that question for a moment, but I would not recommend it going direct deposit. I would recommend you actually handing them a check and having them sign off that they received it and the date on which they received it. That really is your only true defense in the event that you get served with one of these notifications, is that you can say, we gave them the check, this is the date we gave it to them, they accepted it. If they chose not to deposit it, if they lost it, if they destroyed it, that's not on us. You know, we met our requirement. So I would definitely not recommend 5-day payouts be through direct deposit. If we're in Albuquerque and the check has to be delivered to Albuquerque, does that time count in the 5-day deadline period? Would the agency be able to pick up the check from Santa Fe? Yes, Jerry, anytime we issue a check, you always have the option of picking it up in Santa Fe's distribution. There is no caveat, there is no exception for delivery time. 5 days means 5 days. So the Labor Department does not care if you're in another town, if you're in another state, if you're in another country. The 5-day rule applies across the board, regardless. It is up to the employer to ensure that they have met that 5-day requirement. And does this apply to probationary dismissal? I would say yes. If the probationary dismissal is involuntary, then yes. If you decide that the employee was hired and they did not meet the requirements or the abilities of the job during their probationary period, it is still considered an involuntary termination and the 5-day rule would still apply. Is there a way for Wells Fargo to check to see if the check was deposited or accepted? Sometimes it's not safe to meet with an employee who was terminated. Yes, we do have the ability to check Wells Fargo whether a check was processed and paid. If it is not safe for you to meet with the employee to provide them with the check, then I would recommend certified mail, return receipt, where you put it into the mail and you ask for a return receipt on it. That really is probably the best way to handle it if for some reason it would be unsafe for you to meet with the employee to provide them with that payment. Okay, any other questions around 5-day payouts? Okay, Greg. So that is why I recommend. So Greg is asking, how do you meet the um upon demand requirements? If you terminate an employee at 4 p.m., how do I hand them a check at 5? The only way you can do this is if you had already reached out to payroll and said, we are going to be terminating this employee. I need to have his final pay ready to hand to him when we terminate him. So if you are terminating an employee at 4 p.m. and you anticipate an on demand, meaning that you know that they're going to be disgruntled and they are going to be difficult, I would definitely say I need the check from payroll before I terminate this employee. There is the ability for us to issue that check without prior to it being done, the day being concluded. So because most involuntarily terminated employees are put on some type of administrative leave, you know when you're going to terminate them. So if you've got an employee that you're doing an investigation on, the investigation has wrapped up, and you know that you've set up a meeting at 10 o'clock that morning to terminate the employee, the day before you should, or 2 days if at all possible, you should have reached out to payroll and said, I'm doing an involuntary termination on this employee at 10 a.m. Is it possible to have their final pay in my hands when I terminate them? And we can cut you a check. We need to know how many hours they work or you're anticipating paying them through and the amount of their TLV. As long as we have that information, we can issue you a final check. But if we, as in most cases, payroll has no idea what is going on at the agency level. We do not know if a termination is voluntary or involuntary. We do not know if this is a highly disgruntled employee and you're going to get an on demand request, or if you need to meet a 5-day payout. So you have to communicate with us in order for us to assist you. We can help you in most instances meet your requirements, your legal requirements, but we have to have advance notification. As I stated, payroll cannot issue a same day check. It's just not possible for us to do so. We can potentially issue a check within 24 hours, but both B warrants have all B warrants processed overnight. So we have to have that overnight processing time. Additionally, I believe our cutoff is 2 p.m. So any information that needs to be input into the system for that overnight processing has to be done by 2 p.m. that day. So if you know you're going to terminate somebody today at 4 o'clock, you should have reached out to us yesterday morning in order to get a check by today. So that is really the only way that you would be able to meet that on-demand requirement. Zach is asking, would DFA be willing to mail out a check on behalf of agencies? No. DFA does not mail out checks on behalf of agencies because most of the time, we don't know whether those checks require signing off that the employee has received them, or if the employee, you just hand them to the employee. We do not take the responsibility for ensuring that you have delivered your checks to your employees. So if you are going to mail the check, you would need to pick it up and have it mailed, or hand delivered. I do not know of any instance where DFA would mail out the check on behalf of an agency. So Teresa saying we're providing the check with the NFA or letter is delivered. Teresa, I completely apologize. I don't know what the NFA is, so I'm not real certain what you're referring to there. If you want to elaborate a little, I think that might be helpful for everybody. Is the final worked hours and TLV hours on the final check? Yes, as long as central payroll is provided with that information, both the final worked hours and the TLV hours are on the final check. Are you able to FedEx the final check to the agency so we have it in hand? DFA does not deal with FedEx. So no, the only options that DFA has is to put it in the regular mail or to send it by DMC. We do not FedEx. It's my understanding. And Malaya is saying, Teresa, there would not be a way to do that. And Teresa is saying, we're providing the final check to the employee when the notice of final action or termination letters are issued to the employee. Which I agree with Teresa, that is definitely the best way to do it. But there are some circumstances where they're not able to do that. I love HR lingo. I'm so glad everybody knows what an NFA is but me. I'm like, okay, everybody's telling me what an NFA is. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I really do. Because I'm like, I don't know what an NFA is. So see, there are some things that I don't know. Susan, so basically there is now only two options: either have a check ready for final demand or pay the EE out in 5 days. The previous process of waiting until the PPE finally balances hit their bucket, then processing their TLV in the next pay period. This does not exist any longer, correct? That is correct, Susan, if it is an involuntary termination. We are only talking about employees that are being involuntarily terminated. Teresa's saying you have to plan well ahead in advance with DFA and labor. She is correct. An involuntary termination should almost never be a surprise. It should never be something that the agency hasn't had forewarning of. I can think of a few instances. For instance, if somebody is threatening or potentially somebody comes to work under the influence, there could be reason for immediate termination. However, I think even in those instances, it requires some type of review or investigation, which means that you would put the employee on administrative leave until an investigation is completed and then make a final decision. So I really don't know of any instance where an involuntary termination would occur without the agency having prior knowledge to this event happening. Malay is asking, how can you ensure the hours are correct if you are providing them the check at the time of the dismissal? So again, in most of these involuntary termination instances, I think the only one may be probationary employees that you decide aren't meeting, but even then, the agency would determine at what point you're going to notify the employee of the termination. You don't send out letters saying you are terminated. That should be a discussion that's had face to face in person with these employees. And you set up an appointment time to discuss this with them. So if I am in HR and I know I have to terminate this employee at 3 o'clock this afternoon, I should be notifying payroll that their hours are in, their hours are approved, we're paying until 4 p.m. These are the total hours. This is the total TLV. Please issue me a check. I mean, I cannot think of any circumstance under which all of this would occur within a 24-hour time period without the agency having any notification. So if somebody has one and wants to throw it up, that would be great. So that way we could discuss how to handle these events. But I can't come up with anything in my own mind that would say this wasn't a planned occurrence and can be accounted for appropriately. Now, does that mean that the agency may be paying for 15 or 20 minutes that the employee wasn't even on premises? That's entirely possible, but that is something that is going to be a lot cheaper than being hit with a failure to comply notification on this 5-day payout rule. Bailey is asking, what about accruals that haven't populated during the middle of the pay period? As I stated, Bailey, we do have a process by which that can be calculated and added into the system to ensure that we are paying out all of the amount owed to them, including the accrual for the hours worked on the final paycheck. And Teresa saying, you prorate the hours they would accrue through their last day. DFA will pay out those hours in advance and will then zero out after payroll. And again, Teresa is absolutely correct. That is exactly what will happen is we prorate them, we accrue them, and then once the payroll processes, they zero themselves out. Brenda is saying, if we recently terminated an employee involuntarily on 5/7/26, do we need to process their check ASAP, or do we wait for pay period ending 5/22 to process their TLV? I would recommend processing it ASAP. 5/7 has already passed the 5-day payout, so I would definitely recommend you processing that check as soon as you possibly can and not waiting for pay period ending 5/22. Again, if you don't know how to do that, Brenda, reach out to your payroll administrator and they will assist you with that. Heather is saying an issue will be when HR changes the timesheet and the employee receives notice of the change to the timesheet. They may make additional changes prior to DFA completing the process. So, as I understand your statement, Heather, you're saying that you may have had to add time or change time that the employee had already input, and they will receive an email that says, Audrey Beck has changed your timesheet. And that's true, but it doesn't say what those changes were. So I guess you're questioning if they see the TLV amounts on there, that would give them the heads up that something is going to occur. Is that what you're asking, Heather? Steve is saying, will DFA provide an SOP on how to enter the terminal leave for the 5-day payout rule? Stevie, that's why I'm referring you to MAPS Payroll 1.7. It does provide you with the information on how to handle those. I would also recommend reaching out to your payroll admin. I don't know that the MAPS PR 1.7 has been updated for the most current turn of events, because all of those updates were made in like March. But yes, we can provide some training on how to do a 5-day payout or an on-demand payout. So Claudette, if you would make a note, this may be something that we definitely need to do some additional training on and provide in-depth SOP on how people can enter these.
Yeah.
Thank you. Malaya, I guess it does not apply for agencies who do not have 24 hours operation. We regularly have to call people in on their days off if someone anticipates that they are only going to be there an hour and they end up there longer, returning equipment or other circumstances. Or we recently had an employee who was not able to come in when called. Then when they came in, they ended up having to leave and come back again. Had the check already been issued, it leaves the potential for errors. Malay, you are correct. It does leave the potential for errors, but here is the truth of the matter. If you issue them a check that is short by an hour or short by 15 minutes, you can easily issue another check within a short period of time and thereby have a defense. So a penalty for 15 minutes of not paying them within the 5 days versus a penalty of 240 hours of TLV and 80 hours of work is significantly different. So we're not saying we are going to be able to eliminate all of these potential penalties, but what we're trying to do is mitigate the amount. We're trying to reduce the risk that it is a large penalty. So an agency can absorb a $50 penalty, a $100 penalty. Some agencies cannot absorb a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 penalty for failure to meet these deadlines. So I would be less concerned about underpaying someone by 15, 20, 30 minutes than by not paying them within that 5-day deadline. Does that make sense? And Teresa's saying, Heather, by the time they are probably on admin leave and don't get the mail because they don't have access to their email. So Teresa is saying, Heather, that they won't be notified if they're on admin leave because you should have turned off their ability to receive state email, and so therefore they wouldn't be notified. Gloria, if they're on admin leave during this time for purposes of investigation, they won't receive the email notifying them if timesheet changes. Again, same answer. Thank you, both of you. I appreciate this. This is why we have these, because HR staff knows things that payroll does not know. Not all employees are placed on admin leave prior to termination. I agree with Heather. Entering the TLV payout on the timesheet will alert the employee. The only reason I was saying that I would see an employee not placed on admin leave prior to an involuntary termination is if it is the result of probationary failure. And at which case, even a probationary failure should have an indication as to whether or not they are meeting expectations. So if you're terminating somebody on probation, I would assume that that person is aware that they were not successful during their probationary period before that final termination is made. There should be conversations with people during that evaluation period to indicate whether or not they are being successful. And if they're not being successful, they would probably be anticipating that termination anyway, in which case they would simply know in advance. I'm sorry, I have the hiccups. they would know a couple of days in advance that they were going to be terminated. So I think that the only instances where that would really be applicable is if they were probationary employees and the impact would not be as potentially harmful if it was that case. Now, again, I don't work in HR, so I don't know. There may be risks there that I'm not aware of. I live in a very sequestered kind of role in payroll where I don't have to deal with the turmoil that the HR staff has to deal with. So I can't tell you whether or not this is going to have an impact. All I can do is relay what the rules and requirements are, and it's up for you and your agency to make the decisions on how you choose to enact those. If they feel like it is more of a risk on the current employees, then you can always say, no, we will eat the penalty if we receive it. I can't even say that all agencies are going to receive these penalties. All employees are going to go down this path and pursue this matter. There are only certain employees that are angry enough that they go to LRD and file these claims. So, it's not necessarily everybody is going to do it. What it is it's a potential risk, and the agencies have to determine which risk they would prefer to take. If it's my choice of putting my peoples in harm's way or potentially paying a fine, I'll take the fine. But I can't make that decision for the agencies. All I can do is provide the information, let you know what's out there, and then each agency has to determine how they want to handle these moving forward. So that's really all I'm trying to do is provide you with the information, and then your agency can discuss what pathway they want to take. Gregory, probationary terminations will have access to their email and timesheets up to the time they are termed and shut off. Correct. Malaya, our agency hasn't had any issues with requesting the 5-day payouts and getting them timely, but I do appreciate the clarification. Thank you. Anyone not on admin leave will be noticed. Correct. And again, like I said, this is an agency determination. All I can do is tell you what the risks are and what the agency will need to make the determination as to whether they want to adhere to it or not. So please don't think I'm saying you have to. You don't have to. But in the event that you don't, be prepared that you may receive notification from LRD that this employee has pursued the non-compliance issue with the 5-day payout. Janine is saying some agencies have at-will employees and don't follow the contemplated action final notice process and or don't place employees on admin leave prior to termination. However, as I understand, if an at-will employee is terminated today, it wouldn't be effective until 24 hours later, which would provide the time to get the final check. Is that correct? That is actually correct. So if an employee is terminated today, the clock starts tomorrow. So if they are terminated today, you have 5 days after discharge. So the clock starts tomorrow when they are discharged. Heather, I agree with Malaya saying, Heather, I agree with you. Just because someone is being dismissed does not mean they are on admin leave. Not all dismissals come with a safety or security concern that leads to someone being placed on admin leave. And Gregory, since we are using the spreadsheets to determine accrued final pay, I guess we could hold off on correcting a timesheet until after the termination. Correct. That is not true, because when we pull the time actually pulls from what is in the system. So if the timesheet is incorrect, it is going to pay incorrectly. So you have to have a corrected timesheet for that final payout. So unfortunately, Greg, you cannot hold off on correcting the timesheet until after the termination. Ronald is saying, here is a scenario I anticipated our agency. An employee in our Roswell office is placed on paid administrative leave while we investigate them. Then we determine that termination is appropriate and request a paycheck from the DFA. We pick up the check from the DFA in Santa Fe and mail it to our Roswell office so it can be served with the termination letter. The check will take 3 days to arrive in Roswell via certified mail. While the check is en route to Roswell, the employee chooses to immediately resign before they are served with the termination letter. In this case, the paycheck amount will exceed the time the employee worked or the time the agency employed the employee. What do we do with the check that the DFA provided in that situation? That situation is simple. You take the check, you void the check, you return it to DFA, you correct the timesheet, and you let them get paid in their normal pay cycle as per the rule with voluntary terminations. So if we issue a check in anticipation of a termination and the employee resigns, then we can always, and that's why I recommend a check and not direct deposit, because we can always void that check, pay that check at the bank, and reissue the appropriate payment. So this scenario, Ronald, would actually be a best for both worlds scenario, to be quite honest with you, because it's much easier to correct this situation than it would be had the check not arrived within 3 days and you had not been able to terminate the employee, or they had accrued additional hours during that time period. Okay. Any other questions or things that we wanted to discuss? I mean, this has been a great discussion, guys, and this is why we bring things to these meetings, is so that the community can have discussions. As you have mentioned, you see things I don't see and I can't possibly account for because I am not in your role. All I can do is provide you with the rules as we see them in payroll and give you a heads up. And each agency has to determine how they want to handle and move forward. We've gotten some great feedback from several of the experts within the community that understand your sides of it and are able to provide you with some answers and clarification that payroll didn't have. So I appreciate everyone in the audience for participating in this discussion. You know, that is one of the things that make these so valuable, is that we can bring this community together to work through some of these lovely nuances that we have to deal with within our roles. So thank you very much. If anybody has any additional questions or thoughts as we proceed, please feel free to throw them up in the chat and we will cover them as we move on to the next slide, please. All right. And the next topic is preventing overpaid holidays. So overpaid holidays occur because the work groups are incorrect. So it's really important that we inactivate work groups promptly. why it matters is because if an employee terminates before the end of a pay period containing a paid holiday, they may accidentally receive holiday pay. And as we're coming upon our next holiday, this is really timely information. We see a lot of overpaid holidays on a regular basis because the work groups were not inactivated. And whenever an overpayment occurs, it requires corrections, manual adjustments, and agency follow-up. So agencies should inactivate the employee's work group upon notification of termination. So as soon as you are notified that an employee is terminated, you should go in and inactivate their work group. Do not wait until the next pay period, because this will ensure that employees who are no longer eligible do not receive accrued holiday hours or holiday pay. So, for instance, let's say that I was going to terminate as of the end of the pay period. And the end of the pay period happens to be the 4th of July. And my last day worked is the 3rd. And normally my pay group would allow me to be paid for the 4th of July. And I'm assuming that the 4th is on a Friday. I don't have a calendar in front of me. So please don't. Okay. So, per the rules, in order to be eligible for holiday pay, you have to work or be on approved leave both the day before and the day following the holiday. If I terminate on the 4th of July, there is no way that I can have worked or been on approved leave the day after the holiday. And therefore, I would not be entitled to holiday pay for the 4th of July. And if my work group has not been inactivated, I could potentially be paid for that day. So that's why it is very, very important to make sure that we inactivate the work group on the 3rd of July to ensure that they do not get paid for that 4th of July holiday. This practice is not limited to holidays. Work groups should always be updated promptly to avoid overpayments caused by accidental timesheet entries and approvals. So this is a best practice. It is something that we should just make it a habit of doing. Is as soon as we know that an employee is terminating, we go in and we inactivate the work group on that date of termination to ensure that there is no potential for overpayments that the agency would then have to go back and collect either from their TLV or from the employee directly. Any questions on that? All right. TRC changes. So payroll has figured it out. It's the best way I can say it. So in the past, when we did additional pays, and those additional pays required para withholdings, we would put them in as an NAD and manually input the para calculation. And for those of you that have received such payments or have reviewed people's pay stubs that have received such payments, when we use NAD, it comes across on the pay stub as no para, additional pay, no para. And it has been my goal since I started here to get that corrected. We finally figured out how to get this corrected. So moving forward, if you submit a request for an additional pay that is subject to para, please use the TRC ADL on the request. ADL will reflect as additional pay subject to para. And we have figured out how to actually make that subject to para, and so that the para will be calculated and taken out of it. If an additional pay is not subject to para, please continue to use the TRC NAD, and this request should not come with a para adjustment. So with an ADL, you would submit the additional pay, you would show it as an ADL, and it would come with the para correction worksheet. If you submit it as an NAD, there would not be a para correction worksheet because there will not be any para taken from this additional pay. And it has taken us 4 years to figure this out, but we finally did it. So I'm really excited about this. And it will reflect correctly on their pay stubs. So they will see the additional pay as being subject to para or not subject to para, which should make everybody's lives a lot easier. Next slide, please. Okay, some cleanup information. Please verify new hire social security number by comparing it to their social security card. This should be done even if a passport is provided for an I-9 verification. We are still getting notifications of incorrect social security numbers being input into the system. And a lot of it is caused by inability to decipher the writing of employees on their forms, or an employee transposing, or just simply putting the wrong numbers there. Maybe they don't remember their social security number. For whatever reason, it is important that we only put in correct social security numbers into the system. So all agencies should be requesting a copy of a social security card, at least to view and compare to the paperwork. So that way, if you cannot read the I-9 or you're questioning it, you have the social security card there to verify that number for. When we input an incorrect social security number, it can create a lot of issues, not just with W-2 reporting, but with verification of eligibility to work, with people having, perhaps we could have 2 employees with the same social security number in the system. You know, those socials are very, very important. We need to have the correct number. We need to be taking steps to ensure that we are getting the correct number. Remind all employees that they should be verifying their payroll information, including their name, addresses, and social security numbers. Make sure that their benefits are being taken out correctly, especially as we get into the crossover of the fiscal year and the benefit changes. You know, employees are responsible for ensuring that their information is correct in the system, as well as agencies. So it's very, very important that we remind employees that periodically they should be reviewing the information to ensure that it is correct, that their addresses are correct, that their socials are correct, that they're earning the right rate of pay, that their benefits are being taken out, and they're not going to have to come back and pay us a lot of money because we missed their benefits. The second issue that we're having is when you're inputting information into HCM, you should only be using English characters. We are seeing an uptick in Spanish punctuation being used in names, in addresses. That information should only be entered in your standard keyboard alpha keys. Do not put Spanish punctuation in HCM. Additionally, do not use colons to indicate apartments. So we'll see an address, apartment something. Please do not do that. And do not use brackets to indicate a nickname or to distinguish whether this is a mailing address versus a physical address. Whenever you use special characters in HCM setup, those characters are then generated on all of the reports that we issue, on the para reports, on the tax reports, on all of the reports that are created that uses HCM information. It pulls those characters. And unfortunately, para does not accept those characters. It will cause the file to fail. The IRS does not accept those characters. It will cause the file to fail. TRD does not accept those characters. It will cause the file to fail. So every time an agency uses a Spanish punctuation, a bracket, a colon, in a name, in a mailing address, in any information that gets pulled to generate reporting requirements, it causes our files to fail. And then we have to go in and determine what created this issue. Now, some of these files have 50,000 lines on them. So you can imagine how difficult it can be to try and determine what caused that file to fail. So I am asking for you to please, when you input people into the system, please make sure that you are not using any of these special characters. And if you already have them, please remove them. I have identified 5 agencies that have these special characters in their employee data setup, and they do need to be removed. So expect me to be reaching out to you. Dashes and hyphens in last name are fine, but that is about the only time it is. So that is the only special character that does not appear to be causing any issues. But I can tell you, all 3 of the ones that I've listed, the Spanish punctuation, the brackets, and the colons, we have in our files that are currently being generated that have created issues with our quarterly reporting and our monthly reporting to agencies that we have to report to. So please make it a point to ensure that, and I understand that a lot of times it is when you're copying over information from recruiting into the setup that it does that. But if recruiting has the Spanish accents, then it needs to be changed to a non-Spanish accent. Alonzo's asking, so would an accent or even over an yes in their names be a special character? Yes. Yeah, the Inyas are causing problems. I have seen the tildes over the I's that cause problems. So any of the Spanish punctuation causes problems. And so we have to go in and change those. So yes, Alonzo, you are correct. And so accents over names, over street addresses, cause problems. Any other questions on that?
Audrey, I just want to mention as well, the employees can request that their name be changed through employee self-service. They also have the ability to change their address. So some of these issues can come from that. With the name change, that is something that you as HR are supposed to be validating. The name change doesn't go through until you actually approve it. And so if they do put in something with a non American standard alphabet, then and please don't approve that, or approve it and then go in and change it to make it the non Enya or whatever the equivalent would be.
Thank you, Audrey. Great point. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this is the question that was asked earlier about direct deposit. So manual warrants will have the ability to go direct deposit at the beginning of next fiscal year. Direct deposits will be rolled out for manual warrants, and training will be provided as we get closer to the date. Now, with this change, with us moving to direct deposit for manual warrants, there will be some changes that will be put into the process. One of the changes is manual warrants will not be generated for less than 8 hours. So if an employee forgot to put in 2 hours of annual leave, we will not do a manual warrant for that. The employee will have to wait until next pay period in order to get paid for those 2 hours. If an employee is underpaid for an entire day, we can do a manual warrant for that. Additionally, because we are offering the ability to do it by direct deposit, manual warrants will be processed once per week on Wednesdays for direct deposit only. There are exceptions that can be made. So if an employee requests a check as opposed to direct deposit, then we have to look at the circumstances under which they were underpaid. But for the most part, if an employee is set up for direct deposit and a manual warrant is requested for them for 8 hours or more, it will go direct deposit on Wednesdays. So that means every Wednesday we will be issuing direct deposits for any manual warrants that were submitted to payroll. And there will not be any hard checks unless a request for a hard check is generated, and then that would have to be approved. We are trying very much to get rid of checks, issuing checks, so that we can help save some of the costs and the expense. For those of you that don't know, checks are very expensive to generate. It takes a lot of manpower to generate one check. We have 3 different areas within DFA that each check has to pass through before we can release a check out the door. So the man hours alone are excessive for a check for 2 hours. And we're no longer going to allow those to be processed. So unless an employee has been underpaid by an entire day, they will have to wait until the next pay period in order to be paid for those hours. On the bright side, this means there will be less opportunities or requirements for your runners to pick up checks at DFA. If you request a manual warrant, it will automatically be sent direct deposit unless the employee has not signed up for direct deposit, which we know we're all encouraging all of our employees to sign up for direct deposit. And only if there is an exception, for instance, a 5-day payout where you need to hand the employee the check, will you can request a physical check. But for the most part, it will go the way that the employee has set up in the system. And if they're set up for direct deposit, then it will be direct deposited on Wednesday. Hopefully, this will make the employees a little more attentive to their payroll and to the fact that if I am not monitoring the input of my time and making sure that my timesheet is correct, then I will have to wait until the next direct deposit cycle. So Gloria is saying, will the state eventually require all employees to receive direct deposit? Gloria, there is already a statute that says that DFA can do that. that DFA has the authority to require all employees to go electronically. We have chosen not to force that issue because there is a rule, and I believe it's a Department of Labor rule, that states if you require electronic payment, you must provide a mechanism by which people can receive the electronic payment without having a bank account, which is where most companies go to some form of card, like DWS has a card, CYFD has a card for benefits. So if DWS is paying unemployment, that you can sign up for a card and your unemployment will be deposited to that card as opposed to your bank account. I believe CYFD does the same thing for support payments, where they have a card that they issue to people who are receiving support payments without bank accounts. That's not something that DFA wants to manage or to provide. So as long as we don't have a large number of employees that are unbanked, that don't have them set up as direct deposit, we are not going to force them to do so. But we do encourage direct deposit when possible to all of our employees, because it does make their lives and our lives a lot easier. I mean, think about the time that an employee has to spend dealing with a manual check as opposed to just getting it deposited in their bank account. So, yes, we can. No, we're not planning on forcing them to do it anytime in the near future. Next slide, please. All right, so with this, I'm going to turn it over to Claudette. I thank everybody for their attention. And if you have any additional questions, as I said, please put them into the system and we will answer them as they come up.
Thank you, Audrey. Good afternoon, everybody. Claudette Romero here. I'm going to go over a few changes that we have in FSS. Specifically, we have form submission system, FSS administrator access, agency delegate access, and writ of garnishment that we're going to go over. Our form submission system, administrator access. So every agency that we do have is going to be required to have one designated form submission system administrator. The reason that we're going to have this is because that person will be responsible for managing user access, maintaining and auditing a list of users, and ensuring all submissions have been processed, closed, or returned for corrections. Now, if you have an employee that has FSS access, that is going to be different than FSS administrator access. The FSS administrator will be responsible for helping with unlocking your account. If you get locked out, they can also turn off your access. If for some reason you terminate, they'll be responsible for that, as DFA does not oversee what happens in the agencies. So that'll help us to allow users to have access when they need it, to not have access if they no longer need it. And it'll put the responsibility on the agencies to know what's going on with the administrators. The next system that we have is going to be our form submission system administrator access. We will be requiring all agencies to have this access. There's going to be two forms that we'll need you to fill out. That's going to be the FSS admin form that we have on our central payroll website. Starting June 30th, we are also going to be utilizing the agency point of contact form, which is listed here. We have a payroll section on the form that you can either put a check mark if you are going to be picking up checks for payroll, but we're asking that you also list your name if you are going to be the FSS administrator, so we can ensure that you have the correct access. By doing so, we ask that you put FSS admin right where there's an X, just type it in. It's a fillable form, so you can fill that out and submit that along with your annual forms that you submit to DFA. Anytime that you have a change in agency, an FSS admin change, or if you will no longer be the FSS administrator, we ask that you fill out these forms and submit them to DFA, as well as submitting them in the FSS portal. We also have another form, which is an agency delegate access form. This is a little bit different than the FSS administrator form. The agency delegate access form allows an agency to submit on behalf of another agency. As of 4:30, we turned the system off. If you had prior access to submit on behalf of an agency, that access has been turned off effective 4:30. So beginning May 1st, you will see in FSS that you may not be able to submit on behalf of that agency. If you need to submit on behalf of that agency, we have a form. It is called the Agency Delegate Access Form. It is up on our central payroll website. You can go to resources, and under resources, we have FSS Delegate Access Form. This is what the form looks like. It has some basic information that we're requesting. We're requesting your business unit number that you will be submitting for, and any delegate access that you will be submitting on behalf of another agency. We would also like to know why you'll be submitting on behalf of them. Do you have an MOU in place? Is it that you will be doing HR for that agency? And then also the termination or expiration date that you anticipate being the FSS delegate for. If you have any questions or you need specific training on this, please reach out to me. You can reach out to me by phone or by email. When submitting this form, please submit it through the FSS portal. You'll submit the form as an other submission one-off. If you'd like to also call me or Teams me, let me know that you have submitted these forms. I check FSS daily, and we will be reviewing and approving these forms and granting the appropriate access on these forms. And again, these will be, yes, Audrey.
No, go ahead and finish.
We will be reviewing these periodically, and the reason that we're doing this is because we need to have verification in case we get a SOC audit. We want to make sure that all of our forms are in line with DFA as you would your POC forms, your agency delegate access. We want to make sure that these are updated accordingly, and we have these annually. And I will turn it over to Audrey.
Can you go back to the slide prior?
This one?
Yes. So this agency point of contact form is not a new form. This is a required form by DFA. So every year at the beginning of the fiscal year, agencies are required to complete their point of contacts for the year to give DFA a formal notification of who's going to be picking up checks, who is authorized to sign off on various things. Oftentimes, this has your CFO person on it. It has your runner on it. It has various different people in various different roles. For instance, maybe your procurement officer is on here. This is just the master list, and we've done nothing more than simply add an additional required person that needs to be on this list. And what Claudette said is absolutely correct. We have to have this for our SOC audit requirements, and the POC form and the delegate form are both going to be used as reference points when we have to audit FSS to ensure that only appropriate people have this access. These are audits that we as the DFA have to conduct on a quarterly basis to ensure that we are only allowing authorized users to utilize our systems, but the SOC audit is an annual audit, and they will be auditing on an annual basis to ensure that we are indeed adhering to our procedures and requirements and ensuring that only appropriate people have access to this system, because there are quite a bit of not PII, but personal information and sensitive information in FSS. So that is one of the reasons why these two new forms are so important. That's all. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then in regards to the agency point of contact form, do we mark the payroll box with an X and the FSS administrator for the individual who should have FSS admin access? So you can mark your payroll with the X like you normally would. However, if you're going to have a specific FSS administrator, we ask that you type in FSS admin because the roles in FSS are different. So you may have somebody that's picking up checks or doing something in payroll. We want to ensure that they still have that access, but this FSS admin access is special access that's given in the FSS platform. So we want to make sure that we cross-reference that when we're also conducting audits to ensure that the person in your agency is granted that correct access. So I would say that you will still need the X, but you'll have to add that second person. If they are needing payroll access and FSS admin access, you may want to put the X and type in FSS admin. Audrey?
No, I was going to say they may need to be on there twice.
Yeah. Our next slide that we're going to go over is writ of garnishments. We have created a job aid to go over the writ of garnishment process. So everything that's going to be listed in blue is going to be a payroll function. So CPB, data control, they're going to, once we get notification that there's a writ of garnishment, they're going to create the writ of garnishment ticket in the FSS system. And then the CPB, it'll then go to the CPB administrator who's going to review the ticket submitted by CPB data control. They're going to process their memo using the wage information that's provided on the garnishment, enter the documents directly into FSS, and then a TXL notification is going to be sent to the FSS agency administrator. Not everybody will see or have access to be able to see a writ of garnishment. It will be specifically the FSS administrator that will see that. And effective immediately, we will no longer be sending information via email to the agencies. It is going to go through that notification system. So we're asking that anybody that is an FSS administrator monitors that, looks at the notification and relays the information directly to the employee. So agency responsibilities are going to be notifying the employee of the garnishment, which is a very critical piece because we need to ensure that it's not only relayed, but it's relayed in a timely manner to ensure that we're in compliance with these writ of garnishments. So what you would do is you're going to provide the employee with a copy of the memo. You'll provide the employee a copy of the writ of garnishment, confirm the employee notification by marking employee notification checkmark in FSS. If you are not familiar with the FSS system, please schedule a one-on-one training with me and we can go over this. And we can do one-on-one training. The final step would be central payroll will be doing the final processing. So they're going to confirm that the agency notified the employee. What they're going to do is they are going to look and make sure that you guys have completed that by clicking that check mark in FSS. That'll allow us and you and the employee the ability to see that this writ of garnishment has been processed. And then if you need additional support, I've provided the CPB trainer's email, my phone number as well. And again, you can do one-on-one training with me. We can go over them live as you need. Or you can always reach out to your payroll admin if you get a notification. You might be new, you don't know what this TXL notification looks like. We're here to assist you with that. And then, does anybody have any questions? Will you be sending out the slide from today? Yes, ma'am. We will be sending out the slides after we finish the quarterly meeting. We'll also post it up on our central payroll website. And we'll also have a copy of the recording that'll be listed after. And then our next slide, we're so excited to announce that we have created a Payroll 101 training. This is going to be a good resource tool that is located in ELM. It is a training that will be required for all new payroll positions or recommended for any payroll staff or HR staff that is needing help with Payroll 101. It's got a lot of good information. It takes about an hour and a half to complete the course, but you can do it on your own timing, or if your management team tells you that they want you to take it, you can go into ELM and provide the code SONM 2097-1. Once that course is completed, please submit your certificate of completion to FSS, and you can use other submission and put Payroll 101 certificate. Will DFA notify HR when there's a writ of garnishment now that it is HR's responsibility? So the notification that you're going to be receiving for the writ of garnishment is going to be that TXL notification. It'll let you know that you have something to review in FSS. And once you receive that notification, the FSS administrator they'll be the ones to get the notification, and they'll relay this information to the appropriate staff in the agency. So that will be the notification that you guys will be getting. It will not be an email coming from payroll any longer. Was there any other questions on the garnishments? What if the garnishment comes to the agency and not DFA?
Part of the process is that they are supposed to notify both the agency and DFA. So if you receive a garnishment and you do not have a notification from Central Payroll that garnishment is in the system, I would definitely forward it over to your payroll admin, because that means that we were not properly served. And then your attorney may have a reason to, when they respond, note that of the improper service. So anytime you receive a garnishment directly, the agency is served with a garnishment, they should first be checking to see if DFA was also served with that garnishment. If DFA was served with that garnishment, then all you need to do is wait for the notification to notify the employee. Otherwise, you would need to notify DFA of the garnishment and alert your attorney when they respond. Or in our case, I think a lot of agencies, DOJ responds for them. We would alert them of improper service.
And Naomi Baldonado is asking for a link to the FSS admin form. That is located on our central payroll website. I'm putting a note here. I can send you the link after the session for the FSS admin form. Do you also need a copy of the POC form or just the FSS admin form? Our agency doesn't have legal services, Deborah Romero said.
In that case, Deborah, it would be the DOJ that notifies it. The central payroll has attorneys that we send all garnishments to. So when we're notifying the agencies, we also have a list of who our attorney contacts are for those agencies, because the attorneys are responsible for answering those writ of garnishments within a timely period as well. So a lot of the times agencies don't get that information unless payroll sends it to them, but the legal side of it has already been addressed because the attorneys, and I'm almost positive it's DOJ, that handles most of the state's garnishments for us.
Okay, and then Naomi said thank you and to send both. So I'm going to go over to my next slide. Again, central payroll trainers, we have open hours. We have kind of changed our open hours a little bit. So we were having them previously from 2 to 4 every Wednesday. We have since changed that, and we're going to do it on a bi-weekly basis on Wednesdays from 3 to 4. I believe this Wednesday will be our first bi-weekly meeting. Anyone can join at any time within the hour to ask any questions regarding central payroll forms, existing requests in FSS, or just FSS in general. It is a great way to meet with other peers, know that different agencies will be coming in all at once. So we ask, because it is an open forum, please keep any information, any sensitive information, don't share any sensitive information. If you have a scenario that you need to ask me a question, please feel free to message me individually rather than like in the group setting or the group chat. It's very general. So if you have any questions, they're very general. I'm going to go to the next slide. I do have, in addition to the open hours, I have a book with me. So if you want to meet with me one-on-one and not join the open hours, you can also do so. I've provided a link here. I have 15 and 30-minute sessions, as well as I do daily one-on-one trainings. So for any help that you need payroll related, if you have a question, you're working on a TLV, you're working on an additional pay, or any of that information, our training unit is here to assist you guys. So we have several different ways that you can communicate, or we can assist you with that. We also have our central payroll website, which is, the link is located here. That is where you're going to find any resource information. You're going to find all of your forms for payroll. And then we also have our Department of Finance and Administrative YouTube channel. That is where you can locate any quarterly meetings that we have conducted. We post those on that website. And that is all I have for you guys today. If you guys have any questions, put them in the chat. Audrey, do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, I think that this was a great back and forth training where we had a lot of interaction, and I'm really glad that people are comfortable and are willing to put themselves out there. As you have learned, Central Payroll doesn't know everything. Some things that you ask, we have to defer to the group because you are the experts. We are here to help. We try to be the experts in our particular area, but there's so much overlap that, sometimes we have to rely on the expertise within the community. And we're very thankful that the community is willing to share that and is comfortable enough to participate in these trainings. We've been doing these for about a year now. I think that we've really been able to share a lot of information with each other, and it's making us all successful. So thank you all for your participation. Look forward to hearing from you, and let us know what your additional training needs may be or what information you would like to hear in the next one. We're going to give you back about half an hour. So nice job, everybody. Thank you for the share team for participating. This collaboration with you as well is helping to make everybody more successful. It really kind of utilizes the time well, giving you all directions so that you can ask questions and get your answers. So thank you all for participating, and we will get the slides out to you, get the quarterly posted, and hope you all have the rest of your day. Enjoy your time.
Have a good afternoon.
Claudette, Jerry's asking if you could put the previous slide up again.
Did you want the payroll resource, Jerry, or did you want the trainer's open hour? I thought she had the previous one, I think it was this one that she had wanted, was the
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good afternoon.
Bye. Thank you.